Ask almost any car enthusiast today about the origins of turbocharging in production cars, and very few will think of General Motors. And they should, because it was the Americans who were first, not, as is often assumed, the Swedes with Saab, and not the Germans with Porsche. In 1962, Chevrolet introduced its version of the Corvair Monza Spider, powered by a flat-six engine producing 150 horsepower and 250 newton-meters of torque. In March of that same year, the turbocharged version of this engine was announced, and by the end of April, it was officially presented to the public. However, 2 weeks before that event, in early April, General Motors had already presented another car, the Oldsmobile F-85 Jetfire. It was this car that became the world's first production automobile equipped with a turbocharged engine. And it is its story that this episode is dedicated to. In the early 1960s, the Detroit Big Three had little idea how many problems Japanese and European compact cars would bring them just 15 years later, especially against the backdrop of the looming fuel crisis. American manufacturers would soon be forced to rethink the very concept of the automobile almost from scratch, simply to avoid surrendering a massive market segment to competitors from overseas. At the time, however, the United States had not yet become deeply involved in Vietnam, and the Beatles were only beginning their rise to global fame. In those years, the only car that could offer any meaningful competition to American manufacturers on their own turf was the Volkswagen Beetle. Even so, the advantages of these small cars were already becoming apparent to buyers for whom miles per gallon mattered more than acceleration figures, and for whom traveling cross-country with the entire family, including a mother-in-law and a beloved Labrador, was hardly a priority. In 1961, General Motors presented its own vision of a compact urban car. It was based on an entirely new Y-body platform with a wheelbase of 2,845 millimeters. By comparison, the Volkswagen Beetle's wheelbase measured just 2,400 millimeters, meaning that vehicles built on the new platform bore little resemblance to the German microcar. That same year, the Oldsmobile division introduced the F-85, a car nearly 4.8 meters long, available as a four-door sedan, a four-door station wagon, and a coupe. Under the hood was a non-optional all-aluminum low-revving V8 with a displacement of 215 cubic inches, 3.5 liters, producing 155 horsepower in its two-barrel carburetor configuration. A few months later, buyers were offered a more powerful version. Thanks to a four-barrel carburetor, a higher compression ratio, and a revised exhaust system, output increased by another 30 horsepower. By today's standards, such figures clearly have nothing to do with the idea of a compact car. And even at the time, that association made sense only in America. Let's be honest. Still, everyone has to start somewhere. Truly compact American cars like the Chevrolet Vega would not appear until a decade later. Until then, the U.S. automotive industry had a long road ahead, one filled with trial and error, engineering compromises, miscalculations, and financial losses. General Motors had no intention of competing head-on with the Volkswagen Beetle. Their goal was far more practical: to occupy a segment slightly below the cars already present in the company's lineup. And to be fair, they succeeded. Vehicles built on the Y-body platform, with a unibody structure and a relatively small V8 by American standards, offered respectable performance, did not consume fuel by the bucket, and provided a reasonable level of usability at a very accessible price. Having achieved that balance, management predictably began thinking about the next step: more power. At the same time, no one was eager to sacrifice the favorable fuel consumption figures, because that compromise was the very foundation of the compact car concept. The desire to have it both ways, to go faster while stopping for fuel less often, proved too strong. Today, with the benefit of 60 years of technological progress, such ambitions may seem almost naive. But this is often how genuine engineering breakthroughs begin. Inside General Motors, there were people willing to take the risk, and the engineers were given a free hand to pursue an idea that, in the early 1960s, was genuinely bold. A team led by Gilbert Burrell approached Garrett AI Research with a request to help develop a turbocharging system for a production road car. Garrett accepted the proposal, even though the task was unfamiliar territory. By that point, the company had extensive experience in aviation and industrial applications. But designing a turbocharger for a passenger car presented an entirely new challenge. We could have built a turbocharger that delivered a significant power increase at high RPM, Burrell recalled in a 1962 interview with Road and Track. But that would have done little to improve torque in everyday driving. What we needed was a street car, not a race car. In the end, the team settled on a small diameter turbocharger. This kept the system compact and ensured acceptable throttle response. The setup also incorporated a wastegate to bleed off excess exhaust pressure, a solution borrowed directly from aviation. Boost pressure was limited to 0.34 bar, a level considered a safe and workable compromise for a production vehicle. The Garrett T5 turbocharger was mounted perpendicular to the crankshaft, with a single-barrel Rochester carburetor positioned ahead of it. This layout quickly exposed serious problems. The air-fuel mixture became excessively hot. Intercoolers were not even part of the conversation in the early 1960s, and the engine began to suffer from detonation. At Chevrolet, engineers working on the turbocharged Corvair addressed this issue in a straightforward way by lowering the compression ratio. Oldsmobile chose a different path. They retained a high compression ratio of 10.25 to 1 and adopted a far more exotic solution, a water methanol injection system. The fluid was marketed under the name turbo rocket fluid and stored in a separate reservoir under the hood. During hard acceleration, it was injected ahead of the turbocharger, where evaporation cooled the mixture and suppressed detonation. Under spirited driving, the supply lasted for roughly 225 miles, after which the system limited boost until the fluid was replenished. All of the additional hardware weighed just over 16 kilograms, but the results were striking. Output from the 3.5-liter V8 rose to 215 horsepower. In this form, the model was officially named the Oldsmobile F-85 Jetfire. Pricing for the Jetfire started at $3,049, $355 more than a Cutlass coupe. The Hydromatic automatic transmission, power steering, and other options quickly pushed the final price higher, making the Jetfire not only a bold technical experiment, but also far from a budget-friendly one. Naturally, the first attempt to introduce such a complex and previously unexplored technical solution could not avoid problems. The main issue is that most buyers simply did not fully understand what they were dealing with, despite the fact that the manufacturer went to great lengths in its advertising to explain both the innovation itself and the specifics of its operation. New owners began flooding dealerships with the same question: where did the power go? As soon as the so-called miracle fluid ran out, the engine reverted to a reduced performance mode. Other shortcomings quickly became apparent as well. Automatic transmissions were sluggish, the engine showed a tendency to overheat, and the boost system itself proved unreliable. Too many additional components required constant attention. Yes, buyers wanted lively performance combined with reasonable fuel consumption. What they did not want was a constant maintenance headache. The technology of the early 1960s simply was not mature enough to fully unlock the potential of turbocharging in a civilian car. The American market turned out to be unprepared for the extra operating nuances that went beyond the familiar formula of turn the key and drive. The F-85 Jetfire remained in production for just 2 years. By 1963, it was discontinued. A cosmetic update followed, but it did nothing to improve sales. In total, 9,607 cars were built. The advertising slogan read, "First of its kind and full of surprises." And in that sense, the marketers were not exaggerating. The Jetfire truly was first of its kind, and certainly not short on surprises. The final chapter came in 1965, when a recall campaign offered owners a free replacement of the turbocharging system with a conventional and familiar 4-barrel carburetor. By 1964, the second generation of the Cutlass made its intentions unmistakably clear. America had completely lost interest in overseas automotive trends. The aluminum V8 with a displacement of 215 cubic inches gave way to a cast-iron small block engine of 330 cubic inches. The unibody construction was replaced by a traditional body-on-frame layout, and overall length confidently exceeded 5 meters. For an additional cost, a 400 cubic inch engine was also available, a detail that speaks louder than any words about how radically Detroit's priorities had shifted by the mid-1960s.